are quickly captured, Mr. Speaker, and they become appendages of the corrupt system in our various counties, Mr. Speaker. The same can be said nationally. And this issue, Mr. Speaker, if we were to be honest, and I wish that the country also indulges us, is that corruption is not only a problem of leaders. It's a national problem. It's a values problem that we have as a people. We cannot just speak, Mr. Speaker, about what leaders are doing without taking time to consider and say, how do we demonetize our politics, Mr. Speaker? How do we make politics less influenced and infiltrated by the power of money, Mr. Speaker? Because unless and until a country has that conversation, Mr. Speaker, I am afraid we are not likely to win this conversation. And part of the proposal that must come out of here, Mr. Speaker, is the process of removing money out of our politics, Mr. Speaker. That has destroyed the fabric of our society. And I like the fact that listening to the president the other day, he said, and this is something that, a conversation that many of us have had many times, that even this issue of Harambee, the way it's being done, Mr. Speaker, this presentation of resources, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps it's time to ban it from us as public officials, so that when I go before people, I tell them about policies that I have made to make their life better, not the 2 million shillings that I'm carrying in my car to give them to build a classroom for them, Mr. Speaker. That's a challenge that we must be willing to accept. Because, Mr. Speaker, until, and I must repeat, until we demonetize our politics, Mr. Speaker, and the space of influence, it will continue to be a gold rush and the desire, Mr. Speaker, on every member. You know, people don't know that the cycle of and the life of a politician in this country, it involves running Monday to Thursday, collecting as much as you can, only to go and spend it on Friday to Sunday. And in fact, most of that money, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't even get to the houses of these members. People don't know. If a member makes perhaps $1 million within a week, they'll be very lucky if 100,000 makes it to do anything in their house. 900 of that money goes back to the constituency. Therefore, we must remove that demand and this desire to see members of parliament and politicians and people who are in public offices, Mr. Speaker, as if they are tools for pushing resources and money. Until we do that, but that's just the effects. What we need to address here today is a structural fight, and those that are in the justice and Mr. Speaker, law and order society, that they must come here and we must reveal to each other and tell each other, why is it difficult? Eacc must appear before us, Mr. Speaker, and they must tell us this is what we need to do, so that we know, Mr. Speaker, why is it we are now in the third cycle of county governments, Mr. Speaker. Everybody knows why people can almost kill each other to be county governors, Mr. Speaker. But we don't have a solid case, not one, before any courts of law that can point out and say, this is what we have done as an institution, so that people know this is what we are doing. We will be willing, Mr. Speaker, because this has featured prominently. We are being even challenged, Mr. Speaker, as an institution on the things that we have done and said and the laws that we have passed. We must make it difficult. It must pain people, Mr. Speaker, to break the system after we repair it. It must, the punishment must be punitive, Mr. Speaker, so that it gets to a point where people fear. You know, people don't fear to be corrupt in this country because they know what is the worst that will happen. I will be taken to court, I will pay a bail, and I will walk scot-free. Chances are I'll enjoy that money until I die. Eacc must come to us, Mr. Speaker, and tell us even this new jurisprudence that they are trying to establish, where somebody steals $1 billion, then says, I am willing to part with 300 million, and we remove the case. Unless we didn't read properly. But good leaders, I have said, this is not the time to apportion blame. If there are things that they want us to change, is it their budget? Is it the law as we defined it, Mr. Speaker? Let us listen with an open mind and say, tell us what it is that will respond to this particular issue. Mr. Speaker, the judiciary also has been very silent while all this has been going. In fact, the only thing I've seen the Chief Justice speak about was on the issue of abductions, and I think later on, when her chambers were raided, she issued a statement or something to that effect. But listening into what we are being told and the conversation going around, part of the broken system is our judicial system, Mr. Speaker. People know, Mr. Speaker, that even if you're taken to court, you can find your way around it, Mr. Speaker, that you can buy justice. A country that sells its justice, Mr. Speaker, is not a country. If I know that all it takes for me to get away with murder, Mr. Speaker, is sufficient resources in my bank account, then that is not a country. Judicial Service Commission, Mr. Speaker, just like us and all of us that are in positions of responsibility, Mr. Speaker, must engage and be willing to guide us and say this is what has happened. If you listen, as people who are speaking, people have shared their experiences, how they have been disinherited of properties that were left by their parents because a rich person showed up, Mr. Speaker, and as orphaned children, they could not put up a fight before our courts of law. That is not the foundation of a judicial system, Mr. Speaker. And we need time to reflect. JSC must tell us, what is it that we need to do, Mr. Speaker? Equal opportunities has featured prominently. Many people are saying, we know that all it will take for you to get an employment anywhere is to have people of influence. We have constitutionally mandated institutions, Mr. Speaker, NCIC, and so many others. Let's see the studies that they have done so far out of the millions that we have sent to them over the years. Are they just collecting per diems and traveling to Naivasha? Or they have done a scientific study that can help us to appreciate? You know, the problem in this country, Mr. Speaker, is that people love proposing half solutions. And that's what we are being told, that that is not enough. It is not just enough to tell us that this community has this percentage of jobs, this one's has the other. Can you make recommendations? And we are willing to come and pass a resolution of the House, Mr. Speaker. If it is established, Mr. Speaker, that the community that I come from has more than an equal share of opportunities, Mr. Speaker, in the various cadres and levels of government, Mr. Speaker, let's pass a resolution here and say that until such a time that others get an opportunity equitably, Mr. Speaker, we don't give chance to those but unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, listening and reading the reports that have come from NCIC, it is so basic and it's like the person who designed it just wanted to appease people with little facts here and there, Mr. Speaker. Oh, Kikuyus have this percentage, Luos have the other. That's not enough. Break it down. Work like a serious institution. Tell us how many CEOs exist in public service. Give us their distribution. How many senior level managers exist? How many are ordinary clerks, Mr. Speaker? We could be talking about a particular community that has a certain share, Mr. Speaker, but they are all clerks and drivers. It's not the same. We need a more detailed study so that you lead us as a house into making this conversation. I'm trying to rush, Mr. Speaker, because I know time is not on our side. Governance on our value systems, Mr. Speaker, featured prominently in this conversation. And we must put it either by law, by design. What is it that you do as a public official when certain things are said about you? How is it, Mr. Speaker, that in certain countries, that you as a public officials, even when you are just accused of having an extramarital affair, forget about stealing public resources, the system is so advanced that you are challenged and are told, Mr. XYZ, if you cannot be faithful even to your partner, you cannot be faithful to your current, to the country, that your character has